Lily was the new girl at Eastside High. On her first day, she noticed something strange about locker 237. It stood at the end of the hallway, isolated from the others, and students seemed to avoid it. During lunch, she asked her new friends, Emily and Jake, about it. "Nobody uses that locker," Emily said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's cursed." Jake nodded solemnly. "A girl named Sarah used it last year. She disappeared without a trace. People say if you listen closely, you can hear whispers coming from it." Intrigued but skeptical, Lily decided to investigate. The next day, she lingered in the hallway after school. The corridor was eerily quiet as she approached locker 237. Taking a deep breath, she pressed her ear against the cold metal. At first, she heard nothing. But then, faintly, she made out the sound of someone crying. Startled, she jumped back. Determined to prove it was just her imagination, she opened the locker. Inside, it was empty, except for a small, dusty mirror hanging on the door. She reached out to touch it, and suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. Lily found herself engulfed in darkness. She fumbled for her phone to use the flashlight, but it slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. As she bent down to pick it up, she heard the whispers again, louder this time, and a cold hand brushed against her shoulder. Panicking, she turned around, but no one was there. The whispers grew more insistent, forming words she could barely understand. "Help me, please." Her heart pounding, Lily grabbed her phone and sprinted out of the school, not stopping until she was safely outside in the daylight. She told Emily and Jake what happened, but they only looked at each other with grim expressions. "The same thing happened to Sarah before she vanished," Emily said. She heard the whispers too. Over the next few days, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She began hearing whispers in her own home, seeing fleeting shadows in her peripheral vision. One night, she woke up to find the mirror from the locker lying on her bed, though she had never taken it from the school. The whispers were deafening now, begging for release. "Help me. Find me." Terrified, she realized she needed to return to the school and face whatever haunted locker 237. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of dread, she sneaked into the school after dark. As she approached the locker, she saw a shadowy figure standing in front of it. It was Sarah, her eyes hollow and pleading. "Help me," she whispered. Lily reached out to touch her, and suddenly, she was pulled into the mirror, finding herself in a dark, twisted version of the school. Sarah was there, but she was not alone. Other ghostly figures surrounded her, all victims of the cursed locker. "You need to break the mirror," Sarah said, her voice echoing around the dark space. "It's the only way to free us." With trembling hands, Lily smashed the mirror with a rock she found on the ground. As it shattered, the spirits let out a collective sigh of relief and began to fade away. Sarah gave Lily a grateful smile before disappearing. Lily found herself back in the hallway, the broken pieces of the mirror scattered around her. The whispers were gone, and she knew the curse had been lifted. From that day on, locker 237 remained empty, a silent reminder of the horrors that once lurked within. But every now and then, Lily could still hear a faint whisper, as if thanking her for setting them free. After the incident with locker 237, Lily thought the nightmare was over. The school returned to its usual routine, and she began to settle into her new life. But the unsettling feeling that something was still watching her never fully disappeared. Months passed, and the whispers became a distant memory. One afternoon, as Lily was sorting through some old books in the school library, she stumbled upon an ancient-looking journal. The leather cover was worn, and the pages were yellowed with age. Curiosity piqued. She opened it. The journal belonged to a student named Margaret, who attended East Side High in the early 1900s. As Lily read, she discovered that Margaret had experienced something eerily similar to what she had. Whispers, cold touches, and a mysterious mirror. According to the journal, the school was built on land that once belonged to an old orphanage, which had burned down under mysterious circumstances. The spirits of the children who perished in the fire were trapped in the mirrors of the school, reaching out to anyone who would listen. One entry caught Lily's attention. Margaret wrote about a hidden room beneath the school where the orphanage's records were kept. She believed the answers to breaking the curse permanently lay there. Determined to find the room, Lily showed the journal to Emily and Jake, who reluctantly agreed to help her. That night, they snuck into the school, armed with flashlights and a sense of dread. They followed the directions in the journal to a disused janitor's closet. Behind a pile of old cleaning supplies, they found a trapdoor. With a deep breath, Lily pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air grew colder as they descended, and the whispers returned, more insistent than ever. At the bottom, they found themselves in a long-forgotten basement, filled with dusty old furniture and crates. In the corner, a large, ornate mirror stood against the wall, its surface covered in grime. "This must be it," Jake whispered. As they approached the mirror, the whispers grew louder, forming words that echoed around the room. "Help us. Remember us." Lily wiped away the grime, revealing an inscription carved into the frame, "To free us. Remember our names." Frantically, they searched the room for any records or clues. Emily found an old ledger containing the names of the orphanage's children. One by one, they read the names aloud. With each name, the whispers grew softer until, finally, there was silence. The mirror began to glow, and the faces of the children appeared, smiling and peaceful. "Thank you," they whispered in unison before fading away. The mirror shattered, leaving behind only the ornate frame. As they made their way back upstairs, the air felt lighter, the oppressive feeling lifted. The curse was finally broken. Lily, Emily, and Jake became closer friends, bound by their shared experience. They often wondered what would have happened if they hadn't found the journal or had ignored the whispers. They knew the school held many secrets, and they had only scratched the surface. Years later, when Lily was packing to leave for college, she found a small, ornate frame in her bag. It was the same frame from the mirror in the basement. Inside, it held a photo of Margaret and the orphanage children, smiling and free. She kept it as a reminder of the whispers that led her to uncover the school's dark past, and of the friends who stood by her side through it all. And though the curse was broken, she always listened carefully, just in case someone else ever needed her help again. Oak Ridge High was a typical small-town school with a reputation for excellence in academics and sports. However, it had a dark history that many students whispered about, but few dared to investigate. The legend spoke of a girl named Clara, who had disappeared without a trace over 30 years ago. Her locker, number 109, was said to be cursed. Sophie was new to Oak Ridge High, having recently moved from the city. She was eager to make friends and fit in, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about her new school. On her first day, she noticed the strange look students gave locker 109, situated at the end of a dimly lit hallway. It seemed abandoned, yet there was always a faint chill in the air around it. Curious and unafraid, Sophie decided to ask about the locker during lunch. Her new friends, Maya and Alex, exchanged uneasy glances when she brought it up. "Nobody uses that locker," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's cursed." Alex nodded, his expression serious. "Clara, the girl who disappeared, used that locker. They never found her, and some people say they can still hear her crying at night." Sophie felt a shiver run down her spine, but dismissed it as superstitious nonsense. Determined to prove her new friends wrong, she decided to investigate the locker herself. After school, when the hallways were empty, Sophie approached locker 109. The air grew colder with each step she took. She reached out and touched the metal door, which was icy to the touch. Taking a deep breath, she opened the locker. Inside, it was empty except for a small, old-fashioned key hanging from a hook. Intrigued, Sophie took the key and slipped it into her pocket. As she closed the locker, she heard a faint sobbing sound. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. Determined to figure out the mystery, Sophie decided to do some research. She spent hours in the school library, digging through old yearbooks and newspaper archives. She found a photo of Clara, a shy-looking girl with long dark hair and sad eyes. The newspaper articles detailed her disappearance, but offered no clues as to what had happened to her. Sophie became obsessed. Every night, she heard faint crying and whispers, calling her name. The sounds seemed to come from her own room, filling her with a sense of dread. She knew she had to find out what the key unlocked. One evening, Sophie stayed late after school, determined to find the lock that matched the key. She wandered the dark hallways, trying every door she came across. Finally, she reached the basement, a place students rarely ventured. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were lined with old, forgotten furniture and supplies. In the corner of the basement, she found an old, rusted door. Her heart pounded as she inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a loud click, and the door creaked open. Inside was a small room, its walls covered in faded wallpaper. At the center of the room was a desk, and on it an old diary. Sophie picked up the diary, its pages brittle with age. It belonged to Clara. As she read through the entries, she uncovered a heartbreaking story of a lonely girl who felt invisible to everyone around her. The diary ended abruptly, with Clara writing about meeting someone who promised to help her escape her misery. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and Sophie felt a cold presence behind her. She turned to see a ghostly figure of a girl standing in the doorway, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "Help me," the figure whispered. Sophie froze in terror, but managed to find her voice. "Clara?" she asked. The ghost nodded. "I trusted him. He said he would make everything better, but he lied." "Who?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. "The janitor. He was new, said he understood me," Clara said, her voice echoing in the small room. "He locked me in here and I never left." Sophie felt a wave of nausea as she realized the horrific truth. Clara had been trapped here, forgotten by the world. "What can I do?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Find my body. Give me a proper burial," Clara whispered. "Then I can rest." Determined to help, Sophie set out to find Clara's remains. She searched the basement thoroughly, eventually discovering a loose panel in the floor. Underneath it, she found a shallow grave with Clara's bones. With the help of Maya and Alex, Sophie arranged for a proper burial. They held a small ceremony, and as they laid Clara to rest, the air seemed to lighten, and the oppressive feeling lifted. After Clara's burial, the strange occurrences stopped. The crying and whispers ceased, and locker 109 no longer felt cold. Sophie, Mia and Alex felt a sense of closure, knowing they had helped a lost soul find peace. However, the experience left a lasting impact on Sophie. She often thought about Clara and the loneliness that had led her to trust the wrong person. She became more empathetic, always looking out for those who seemed lonely or sad. One day, as Sophie was walking down the hallway, she noticed a new girl standing alone looking lost. Remembering Clara, she walked up to her and introduced herself, offering a friendly smile. The school returned to its normal routine, but the legend of Clara remained a part of Oak Ridge High's history. And though the halls were no longer haunted, Sophie knew she would never forget the ghost of the girl who had once called out for help, and the lesson she had taught her about the importance of kindness and friendship. Oak Ridge High continued to be a place of learning, but now it also carried a deeper understanding of the unseen struggles many students faced. And Sophie, with her newfound compassion, made it her mission to ensure that no one ever felt as alone as Clara had. The haunting of Oak Ridge High had ended, but the memory of Clara and the impact of her story lived on, reminding everyone that sometimes the most powerful ghosts are the ones within our own hearts. Hollow Hill High was an old, prestigious school nestled in the heart of a small, foggy town. The school, built in the late 1800s, had a Gothic charm with its stone walls, towering spires, and expansive, shadowy hallways. The students often whispered about the building's haunted past, particularly about Room 103, where strange occurrences had been reported for decades. Sarah Mitchell had recently moved to Hollow Hill with her family. An inquisitive and brave 16-year-old, she was excited about attending a new school, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Hollow Hill High. From the moment she set foot in the building, she felt an icy chill that seemed to seep into her bones. On her first day, Sarah's curiosity was piqued when she overheard some students talking about Room 103. She asked her new friends, Lily and Ben, about it during lunch. "Room 103 is cursed," Lily said, her eyes wide with fear. "Students have gone missing from that room. No one knows what happens, but everyone who disappears is never seen again." Ben nodded, his expression grave. "They say the room is haunted by the ghost of a teacher who died under mysterious circumstances." Sarah's interest was piqued. "Has anyone tried to investigate?" "People have tried," Lily said, lowering her voice. "But anyone who gets too close ends up missing, or worse." Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah decided to investigate Room 103 herself. After school, when the hallways were empty, Sarah made her way to the first floor, where Room 103 was located. The door was old and creaky, its paint peeling. She took a deep breath and pushed it open. Inside, the room was dimly lit by the late afternoon sun filtering through dusty windows. Desks were arranged in neat rows, and an old blackboard stood at the front. Sarah felt a sudden drop in temperature and heard a faint whispering. She walked further into the room, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The whispers grew louder, forming indistinct words. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, and the room was plunged into darkness. Panic set in as Sarah fumbled for the light switch, but it didn't work. The whispers turned into low, mournful wails, and she felt a cold hand brush against her shoulder. She spun around, but saw nothing. Desperate to escape, she ran to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The wailing grew louder, filling her with a sense of dread. Finally, with a great effort, she managed to force the door open and stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. She looked back at the room, now silent and empty, and made a promise to herself to uncover the truth about room 103. The next day, Sarah visited the town library, hoping to find information about the history of Hollow Hill High. She dug through old newspapers and school records, finding articles about the school's early years. She learned that in the late 1920s, a teacher named Miss Eleanor Hartwell had mysteriously disappeared from room 103. The circumstances of her disappearance were never fully explained, but rumors of foul play and supernatural events circulated for years. Sarah found a photograph of Miss Hartwell in an old yearbook. She was a stern-looking woman with piercing eyes. The more Sarah read, the more convinced she became that Miss Hartwell's spirit was haunting room 103, seeking justice or revenge. Determined to find answers, Sarah decided to return to the school at night, when it would be empty and she could investigate without interruption. She convinced Lily and Ben to join her, promising to uncover the truth together. That night, armed with flashlights and a sense of determination, the three friends sneaked into Hollow Hill High. The school was eerily quiet, the shadows deepening as they made their way to room 103. The air grew colder, and the familiar feeling of unease settled over them. They entered the room, and Sarah began to examine it more closely. She found an old, dusty book hidden behind the blackboard. The book was a journal belonging to Miss Hartwell. As they read through the journal, they discovered that Miss Hartwell had been involved in an illicit relationship with the school's headmaster, Mr. Jameson. When she became pregnant, Mr. Jameson had tried to force her to leave, fearing scandal. Miss Hartwell refused, and on the night she disappeared, she had planned to confront Mr. Jameson. Her final journal entry detailed her intention to reveal their affair and his attempts to silence her. As they read the last entry, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the door slammed shut once more. The ghostly wailing returned, louder and more intense than before. The friends huddled together, their flashlights flickering, as the room seemed to come alive with shadows and whispers. Suddenly, a ghostly figure appeared in front of them. It was Miss Hartwell, her eyes filled with sorrow and anger. She reached out towards them, her voice echoing through the room. "Help me. Find the truth. Set me free." Determined to help Miss Hartwell find peace, Sarah, Lily, and Ben decided to search for evidence of Mr. Jameson's wrongdoing. They knew that if they could prove he was responsible for Miss Hartwell's disappearance, they might be able to lift the curse on room 103. The next day, they returned to the library and delved deeper into the archives. They found letters and documents that hinted at Mr. Jameson's involvement in Miss Hartwell's disappearance. There were mentions of a hidden room in the school's basement where Mr. Jameson conducted secret meetings. That night, they returned to Hollow Hill High and made their way to the basement. The air was damp and musty, and the floor was covered in dust. They searched the walls, tapping and listening for hollow sounds, until they found a concealed door behind a stack of old crates. Inside the hidden room, they discovered a trove of documents, including letters from Miss Hartwell to Mr. Jameson, pleading with him to acknowledge their child and take responsibility. They also found Mr. Jameson's diary, which detailed his plans to make Miss Hartwell disappear to protect his reputation. Armed with this evidence, they knew they had to bring it to the authorities. The next day, they presented their findings to the local police, who reopened the case. The news spread quickly, and the town was shocked by the revelations.